Salutations, my friends, and thank you for tuning in to another edition of Crisis Corner. I have actually called this one the Chaos Causality simply because we're going to be looking at the cause and effect of all this chaos that we're seeing, all these protests, all these riots, all these other things that are going on towards the end of 2016, post Donald Trump's election. So, with that being said, let's get right into it. So I've been following the story before and after, clearly, Donald Trump's election. And this is why I keep saying and insisting on the idea that we have to look at what these people represent in the larger aspect. Donald Trump and whoever comes into presidency after that, or in between, if Donald Trump even makes it, will have to start dealing with the technological changes that will be implemented into law enforcement. Not only that, but with law, society, economy, et cetera, et cetera. All these different things are going to be brought into play throughout the next 4 to 8 years, really, truly. And one of the ideas is just that police drones, paradrones, really. The idea that they would use these types of mechanical machines, redundant word right there, use these aerial drones really to surveil the area, to where they would have these perfectly disposable cameras, mobile cameras, that they would be able to deploy across the city or in different districts, different areas, you see. And that's one thing that I think we need to start looking at, is the fact that law enforcement will now be augmented through everyday technology. Okay, they're getting caught up to what we're pushing out. You see, off-the-shelf drones can now be outfitted with multiple cameras for a 360-degree view of the area. Okay, and police will use these types of things to do that, to enforce the law. And this is why whenever I say we need to look at Donald Trump, what he represents, making authoritative statements saying that he's in agreement with stop and frisk, well, what does that mean for the future whenever we actually have drones that could tell a civilian to stop, cease and desist, and then receive some kind of citation via drone? You see, and these are what we're starting to deal with outside of the election. So more and more, we're actually starting to see what happens whenever people come into contact with things such as artificially intelligent chatbots or troll bots, or whatever they're starting to implement on Twitter and even in everyday interactions through your phone, such as things like Siri. More and more are we becoming not reliant, but integrated with technology. We're creating technology to serve us. But what happens whenever we start to have artificially intelligent judges and lawyers that start looking at facts and causality instead of, logic, reason, emotion, things like that, the human nature? You see, this is more and more what we're actually going to have to start dealing with. Factually, could you have done these things? Did you do these things? You probably did these things. There you go. What scares me about this, to a degree, is the fact that I've talked about this before in other episodes. You can check out the Catching Trends segment, where we talk about things such as citizen threat scoring and pre-crime. Okay, what happens whenever they have that kind of information, and some of it is actually skewed and biased to some degree? What happens whenever these artificially intelligent judges and lawyers start pulling upon, say, social media posts to determine whether or not you were guilty? Say that you had an off day prior to your incident, right? And you made some kind of statement, something that just felt, angry, outright angry. But then a few days later, you had your incident. They would obviously make some kind of correlation that the post caused your incident, correct? Well, that might not be the case, because that's not how the world works. However, whenever we leave things up to the machines, whenever we leave things up to Siri, basically, they're only going to give you one-sided, one-dimensional answers. There's no way to fully comprehend the scope and dimensions in which we are interacting with one another, what the human can represent. So whenever we try to just pass off laws and pass off regulations and bills and things like that, it doesn't work like that. Humans are much more complicated, and there's no way that, well, if anything, we can replace or be changed or governed by our very own tools. However, as redundant as that statement does sound, we are now starting to see how robots are trying to replicate reality. How that there can be 40,000 robots deployed in China to replace human workers, while there's also self-sustaining robots that eat real-life organisms to survive. but how in the future self-replacing robots or self-replicating robots could actually change the entire universe. Okay, we are seeing more and more of what happens whenever our mindset that we invest into these tools that we give and imbue with the mindset of humans, how they start to replicate reality. You see, would we not try to conquer everything in our way? Is this not what we've done already? Have we not tried to shape the world in our own image? And these robots that we are deploying to China, that we're deploying to do menial labor ourselves, they are now starting to do the very same thing. Though they might not have the same kind of sentience that we're seeing, expecting for them to, quote unquote, self-replicate or even conquer the universe to that degree, they're simply carrying out tasks. They're extensions of a larger will, somewhat of a hive mind, so to speak. And that's why they have to be grouped together, is because they're just that. They're robots. They're individual extensions of a larger code that is running. So whenever we start implementing these tools, whenever we start having these different, how would you put it? The different ways that life can exist, the different ways that tasks can be performed. You see, that's whenever we start having to look at what it truly means to be human. Obviously, what does it mean whenever we pass off all of our responsibilities to something that can get it done in a quarter of the time? What does hard work mean? What does labor mean? You see, what is determination, motivation, all of these different types of characteristics that have been built upon the fabric of society, that society has been built upon basically, they're now starting to change because we're trying to scapegoat one of the essential things that makes us human. And though most people don't like to do it, I surely don't, labor is where we find the truth. Whenever we toil away, whenever we work away at something, whenever we try to build something with our own two hands, instead of having it 3D printed, or even mass-produced by a factory or some kind of corporation. But whenever we shirk our responsibilities off to these robots that can do these menial labors, that really does truly change what it means to be human and what we expect from our work. And even if we appreciate the different types of things that we do, you see. So these are all different types of facts that we have to come into play with whenever we start talking about what happens with the implementation of robots into society. So with that implementation, I'm sure you're wondering, well, who is sending these people these code? Who are sending the robots the code? Who is sending these types of commands? Who are giving these people the information? How are they doing the things that they are doing? Well, in order for them to have this types of information, they have to have a collective unconscious in which they are able to draw upon. You know, kind of like the internet for robots. They have to have a wealth and plethora of data, information, metadata, quantum information, whatever you want to put it. They have to have all of that to draw upon to make certain decisions, the same way Siri has all of her different map routes to choose from to tell you how to get to your quickest location or your quickest destination, you see. So one of the things that we have to look at here with the robot revolution, with the chaos causality, with the implementation of these types of robots is what happened. How did they get here? How do they have the information that they do have? Well, the simple answer to that is we gave it to them. They weren't born with it. They were created with it through things like this, through things like Project Hemisphere, a secretive program developed by AT&T, which searches trillions of call records in order to analyze cell phone data, spying on the activity of private individuals in order to identify who they are speaking with and why, as well as GPS location and tracking on each individual connected to the call. And it transmits this information to the Department of Justice. Okay, and in 2013, Project Hemisphere was shown in a PowerPoint presentation presented by the Drug Enforcement Administration. The New York Times reported this as a partnership between AT&T and the DOJ, primarily developed for drug enforcement tasks. All information collected in this program is accessible to the federal agencies authorized by the DOJ. AT&T specifically developed and marketed this product for the use by the DOJ, whose promise would be that hundreds of millions in funds on behalf of the taxpayers are using the taxpayers' own money to spy on their very move. This is an invasion of privacy without a warrant. This is a federal spy program by proxy, working through corporations. So I'm sure you're wondering, what did that crazy rant mean? What I'm trying to tell you is they're trying to get every single piece of information they can on you so that they can put it into this type of robot revolution, into this. They're trying to gauge the society. I've talked about this in other series, in other episodes, and other videos. The fact that they're trying to simulate society, the fact that they want to control it, program the population, however you want to look at it. And they have to know, as stated here in this article, that they have to see who you're talking to and why. This goes beyond looking for trigger words and hashtags. This is them actually trying to figure out the causality between the two. Why is this here? Why is this being brought up now? Well, because, guys, all the chaos that we're doing out there, George Soros funding these riots, us freaking out because Trump is elected president, having riots every other 3 months, this is because we're being experimented upon, because we're being programmed. As I've said before, they're trying to do so many different things that we are sitting here like idle sheep waiting for the next external stimuli to happen to our lives. And when this happens, whenever we give ourselves over to this beast system, this conglomerate of corporations, this Congress, you see, these things that degrade our progress, this is what we get. This is what we have. We have people who are trying to systemically dumb us down so that they can implement these new technologies, unbeknownst to us, on subtle ways, on very subtle ways that they're trying to attack our very liberties, our very freedom, to get our information, to get our minds away from thinking that we could have any freedom, any privacy, any individuality. They want us to conform like these robots. They want us in a hive mindset like we are on Facebook. They don't want individual thought. They want us to be programmable like these robots.
Imagine we just built a super intelligent AI, right, that was no smarter than your average team of researchers at Stanford or at MIT. Well, electronic circuits function about 1 million times faster than biochemical ones. Okay, so this machine should think about 1 million times faster than the minds that built it. So you set it running for a week, and it will perform 20,000 years of human-level intellectual work, week after week after week. How could we even understand, much less constrain, a mind making this sort of progress? It's not that our machines will become spontaneously malevolent. The concern is really that we will build machines that are so much more competent than we are that the slightest divergence between their goals and our own could destroy us. Just think about how we relate to ants.
Speaking of more robots and being programmable, did you know that the Defense Advanced Research Project Agency, DARPA, did you know that they had another program with these robots where they're doing just that? They're spying on us from angles that we can't even see. They're the eye in the sky. These are the days of drone detection. This is what the Dragnet program is. It seeks to map small drones in urban terrain using innovative technologies that will provide persistent, wide area surveillance. Okay? Think about that, guys. What have I talked about before in other videos? I know that's probably a very hard question to ask. I've talked about so much. What I'm trying to pinpoint here is Agenda 2030, microgrids, sustainable development. The fact that they want to have us in these little hubs that can be surveilled and monitored, either by AT&T and the DOJ, or by DARPA's Dragnet surveillance program. You see, what this is more of that, the loss of your rights, the loss of individuality, the loss of freedom, because who knows, DARPA, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, MySpace, all these other social media platforms might have your face on it, which could be easily accessible by AT&T and the DOJ or by the Defense Department. You see, this is what we need to start looking at. Whenever we have more of these kinds of riots, more of this chaos, more of this nonsense, where people are over here destroying their very communities, attacking their very own brethren and citizens, they're going to start implementing more of this. Why? So they can start watching us on an even larger and more intrusive scale if they haven't already done so. They want people who are just ignorant, already out there in the streets doing disgusting and negative things, who aren't trying to better their community, who aren't trying to help uplift other individuals, who aren't actually trying to get engaged. That's what they want. They want ignorant masses. They don't want people who are informed of their tactics. And this is why they're diversifying their ways, diversifying the things that they're doing, trying to change their tactics. You don't think they expect to see some of these riots occurring? That's why they've talked about prior to the actual election, they were preparing for civil unrest. It's so that they can implement these types of things. As I said before, they are in the next phase of their operation. And in order for them to do this, well, they have to have the right reason. As we've seen in Ferguson, they have to have us out there acting a perfectly fine fool as provided by George Soros so that they can bring out all of these different SWAT teams, all of these different individuals, all these different drones, all this different equipment. It's because that is the causality of chaos. If you want to see the cause and effect, keep carrying on. Keep seeing what happens whenever you play into these people's hands, and more of this kind of stuff will occur. That's the whole point of this entire video, is to educate you on the causality of chaos, to see what happens whenever we start feeding this beast more and more chaos, seeing what happens whenever it grows. But that's all I really got for you guys. If you have any questions, feel free to email me. I'll have it in the description bar below. And as always, guys, stay vigilant, expose lies, and share truth. This is Noise Era, Freedom Faction, out.